So, in professing these declarations, the church would not hear them passively, but would be drawn to act upon these ethical prophecies. They are basically cause and effect statements. If X is done, consequentially, Y will happen. In the case of Matthew 5:6, if someone hungers and thirsts for righteousness, they will be satisfied in receiving it. Thus, when Jesus declares the Beatitudes, we can have confidence in their fulfillment. This week, we are celebrating the 50th anniversary of Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech. As I've reflected on the civil rights movement, I'm struck by the steadiness and perseverance of the leaders and participants. I listened to a recording of one of the civil rights movement's leaders, Representative John Lewis, giving a speech at the Lincoln Memorial last Saturday in remembrance and celebration of the victories that were achieved during the civil rights movement. I thought about the suffering and the pain and the constant dead ends that the movement faced. And I wondered what it was that pressed them to move forward. There were clearly many impetuses, but I believe that at the root of them all was a hunger and thirst for righteousness. I think that with this solid foundation, the people were able to push through their failures and their sufferings and to see that justice was at some point destined to be achieved. This speech was given in August. The speech of Dr. King was given in August of 1963, and over the next 2 years, the movement achieved major victories. As many of you probably know, the Civil Rights Act and the Voters' Rights Act were both passed. They hungered and thirsted for righteousness, and in many capacities they were filled. It's obviously clear that these acts did not do away with the oppression of the African Americans, or for that matter, any minority. There is much work to be done presently and in our future. However, I believe that it's important for us to celebrate these achievements of the leaders and participants of the movement and to recognize the progress that was made through this unquenchable thirst for righteousness. Justice is not a once and for all act, but it's one that takes a level of learning and growing and living into new revelations as they come before us. With this in mind, I wonder how we as a fellowship are able to live into this revelation of justice that is presented in the verse. Those who hunger and thirst for righteousness will be filled. In educating ourselves in classes, reading about historical events, and keeping current about political happenings, we can become aware of injustices. But it seems that in order for us to have a genuine hunger and thirst for righteousness, as this verse states, we need to translate these somewhat distant events into our own present reality. It is then that we are transformed by the revelation of Jesus' statements. It is then that we are actually filled personally, as a fellowship, and as a society. How do we make this a present reality in our lives? Well, we begin by practicing it. We practice loving our friends, enemies, even those, and those that we meet in passing in creative ways. As Richard Foster says, justice is quite simply dealing fairly with others. So, to begin with, we do what Jesus professed and love our neighbor as ourselves. We live into the reality that each person should be treated equally and with respect. In this knowledge, we work to ensure that all people, especially the poor and the weak, have access to opportunities. Furthermore, we assume that none of us is free until all of us are free. As we begin living into this reality, we will speak up boldly for injustices as they arise. As we think on Dr. King and the amazing feats of justice that took place in the 1960s, I think that it is important to note that this movement was planned and slowly lived into. Dr. King spent several years studying in theological school and with leaders such as Gandhi before he became the amazing, effective leader that was able to catalyze a movement. We are not all called to the same roles in enacting justice as Dr. King, but I believe that in practicing a just attitude and opening our mind and heart to the injustices of others, we will be transformed and live into the reality that Jesus presented. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Amen.
Thank you, Trish. So that's beautifully timed. It seems quite appropriate because Labor Day weekend is in fact a weekend to be thinking about hungering for justice and righteousness in an era when the minimum wage hasn't gone up in my lifetime, and yet the cost of everything has. There's some hungering and thirsting going on. We're called to do it, thank you. So this is a chance now for us to name joys and concerns that we bring to God and each other at this time. A chance to give God thanks, yay God, for whatever it might be that you want to say yay God about, and maybe a chance to ask for some blessings, some help, some guidance, some intervention, whatever it might be, some presence. So what are some joys and concerns that this community brings on this day at this time? Joys, concerns?